for Confederation in 1867, the first few Chinese newcomers were already living and working in the territory that would become part of Canada. By the 21st century, the Chinese had become 3.5% of Canada's population, the nation's largest racial minority. Chinese was the third most spoken mother tongue in Canada, after English and French. In some years, a quarter of all newcomers to Canada were Chinese.
The Chinese who journeyed to North America starting in the mid-19th century came from a rural area near Guangzhou and Hong Kong in Guangdong province. At the end of the 20th century, Vancouver was the most Asian of Canadian cities. It bustled with settled communities from China, Japan, Korea, Southern Southeast Asia.
Henderson Street, west of Main Street, is quieter. Its historic 19th century buildings display Asian touches such as recessed balconies and ornate wrought iron railings. These buildings house organizations from earlier times that are still active because clan and home district loyalties remain important to some newcomers. East of Main Street along Pender and the street south of it, Chinatown is a busy commercial district with stores, bakeries, and restaurants.
After the CPR was built, the Chinese who came to Vancouver worked at the mills and deered land. Racist whites, however, chased them away twice.
When CPR ended, the harbor where ships pushed trade further west and return traffic brought goods and immigrants from China, it was not surprising that Chinatown was near the docks, railway lines, the commercial downtown. Chinatown's first buildings were wood with flat false fronts.
From the start, Vancouver's Chinese merchants asserted the rights they did have and petitioned for improved sidewalks and other services in the 1890s. Vancouver was near many canneries and served also as a center for dispatching cannery workers to northern canneries. By 1907, four firms were earning annual incomes of $150,000 to $180,000. As for laundries, the city restricted them to Chinatown. But by 1900, only two were still located there. The city then banned washing and drying clothes within 60 feet of any street. It called for compulsory smallpox vaccination of Chinese laundry workers and a ban on Sunday hours, and it required laundrymen to be listed as lodging housekeepers. The Chinese hired lawyers to argue their case at City Hall, with the result that some but not all the bylaws were changed. In September 1907, 8,000 whites rampaged through Chinatown, hurling bricks and rocks to break every single window and door. That riot lasted for about 5 minutes. However, it caused $3,000 in damages and $20,000 of lost business. So in protest, the Chinese went on strike for 3 days, abandoning everything. They purchased guns, and Chinatown's merchants hired watchmen to guard their property. This hostility spurred immigrants to try to help modernize China.
While the Chinese community was mostly male, women did come. There were 210 Chinese families in 1920. As Chinatown expanded into Strathcona, a residential district with a mix of Japanese, Jews, blacks, and Eastern Europeans. An unsolved murder highlighted racism in the justice system. In 1924, Scottish nursemaid Janet Smith was found dead in a wealthy home, but after inquest ruled her death accidental, private detectives and policemen seized the houseboy Wang Fun Sing. They questioned and beat him. When a second inquest concluded Smith's death was not accidental, Wang mysteriously vanished. 6 weeks later, he was found lost and dazed, having been severely beaten. Wang said that 3 men had seized him and blindfolded him. 2 men dressed in white robes with hoods over their heads interrogated him. When he couldn't identify the murderer, they beat him. Over the weeks, the beating worsened. At one point, a rope was put around his neck and strung over a beam. Amazingly, he was charged with Smith's murder. Private detectives, police officers, and members of Scottish groups were later charged with kidnapping Wang, but they were acquitted. Outraged, Vancouver's Chinese and the CBA rallied behind Wang, who was ultimately also acquitted.
Economic racism continued to be rampant. Chinese greengrocers multiplied from 52 to 125 in the year of 1925 to 35. New laws regulated the quantities and prices of farm produce allowed onto the market. Cafe owners were also harassed. In 1935, police ordered 3 Chinatown cafe operators to dismiss their white waitresses, alleging that they were prostitutes for Chinese men. The angry waitresses told the mayor no work was available elsewhere. They marched to City Hall with the Vancouver's Mothers' Council to protest.
When World War II broke out, Ottawa refused to draft Chinese Canadians because BC politicians feared they would claim the right to vote.
In the 1950s, the Vancouver Chinese community grew from 8,700 to 1,005,000 as the children started to arrive. More sons though, and less daughters, because of course sons will be much more helpful at a time like that. The sons followed their fathers to work at lumber mills, ferries, and restaurants, but few of them could attend university. Many sons were so shocked at how plainly their fathers lived. Others wanted to return to help China's reconstruction. In the 1950s, several Chinese supermarkets and restaurants opened. Cantonese movies were screened, and furniture and appliance stores were opened. New Realty Insurance and finance companies sprang up, run by young entrepreneurs. By 1956, there was 7 nightclubs in Chinatown that attracted large number of whites. In 1957, Vancouver Centre elected Douglas Jung to the House of Commons, making him the first Chinese Canadian member of the Parliament. How cool is that? Prime Minister Diefenbaker dispatched him to represent Canada at the United Nations, but he lost his seat in 1962. However, he won all the Chinese in the riding had voted for him. The age of Chinatown's buildings and the stigma of being cut slums put areas at risk. This almost destroyed Chinatown because they were trying to break it down. However, public protests stopped plans for freeways that would have destroyed Chinatown. As for laundries, the city There's no music. As for laundries, the city restricted them to Chinatown, but as for laundries,